Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Coming Out Stories from India series. Growing up in India in the 80s and the 90s, I had no role models to help me affirm my own sexuality. Many of the conversations we've had on the Coming Out Stories from India have had a similar narrative. No role models, no Indian lived experiences. The last few years since my own coming out, I have been looking for such stories that could help me in my own journey. So Nicola is my partner, and I decided to launch these coming out stories from India to ensure that there was access for people who needed them. It has been really heartwarming to receive calls, emails, messages from people who are now able to relate to these stories, and have these access to this lived experiences. I'm Raga Olga D'silva, or Totally Out Now, as you know me. Well, so today our guest is a very, very special person. They are well known in the LGBT community and have paved the way for many of us through their storytelling, through cinema. They are someone I personally deeply respect and admire. I am a keen follower of them on Insta, and at times I'm so moved by their Insta posts that I share those posts on my own Totally Out Now platforms. As someone who loves to express myself through, clothes, jewelry, I find their sense of expression absolutely gorgeous. Please join me in welcoming Faraz Arif Ansari.
Thank you so much, Raga. What a lovely, heartwarming introduction. I'm so touched. Thank you. Such a pleasure to be doing this with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you Faraz for agreeing. I know how busy you are. And I know Sheer Qorma, congratulations first of all for the success.
Thank you.
I know Divya as well, and I've been following
Yes,
Swara and Shabana Azmi ji as well. And it's just wonderful that they've all come together and supported the community, I would say, through your
absolutely.
storytelling.
Yeah.
How has been the overall response just before we start?
Oh my God. How has I think it's just I mean we only premiered last month at Frameline in San Francisco, and it's the world's biggest queer film festival. And as Universe had it planned, we won the best film. It's actually become the first ever Indian film to win Frameline in the festival's 45 years of running, which I think is such an honor. To be for me personally, to have to grown up in the 90s, like you said, in India, and to always, I think, being a brown queer person, you're always told that your opportunities are really going to be very limited, and this is the amount of exposure you'll get, this is the amount of this is what you'll get, and you have to be happy with it. But I think with my journey as a filmmaker, I have got so much more than what I was told that I would get. So I think it's really a very humbling experience, and it's overwhelming. I am not going to deny that it does get overwhelming from time to time to be able to take in all of this. But I think I'm very, very, very grateful that the film is doing so well.
I'm so happy, and I'm happy for many reasons. Of course, for you personally, but for many other reasons, which we will delve into as we speak. So, this film is a love story between two Muslim women, right? As I understand.
uh,
Oh,
Not really, because one of them identifies as non-binary. Divya's character identifies as non-binary. The film predominantly is a story about love and acceptance, and I think majorly about the journey of a parent and their child. To be honest, of course, there's a love story in it, and I think our definition of what a love story really means also has to evolve. It's not just about romantic love. A love story can be between a mother and their child. A love story can be between me and my cat. A love story can be between, I think the the dimensions of a love story are endless, for that matter. So I think, yes, it is a love story, but I think more importantly, it's a story about acceptance and love, which does not really take away from the fact that it is also a deeply political and very social film, about the queer community, about the Indian queer community, about the South Asian queer community, for that matter, because I think we've never really been represented, in honestly, we've never been represented with authenticity. We've never been represented with sensitivity. That's always missing in mainstream representation. So Sheer Qorma is, a step towards that direction, trying to make it very progressive and trying to make it very, very universal in that sense.
Fantastic for us. You mentioned the term non-binary, and I know you identify as a non-binary person as well. For the audience, are we able to just kind of define this a bit more? Explain to the audience what the term non-binary means.
I think non-binary is exactly the opposite of binary. I think the binary is, when you really fit into. I'm going to keep it very layman here. I think when you fit into a box of gender, when you identify as a male or as a female, that's a binary. But I think for me, my gender, I think gender is really a spectrum. And I think as we keep evolving, as the world keeps evolving, as our sexualities, as our gender identities keep evolving, we are evolving as well. It's not just an evolution that's external, it's an evolution that's internal as well. And I think it's very imperative for people to understand that gender is not how one looks but how one feels. And I don't really associate myself with the understandings of being male or understandings of being female, and therefore I identify as non-binary. I identify as someone who does not fit into a binary, and that's really what non-binary means. I think for everyone, the definition of non-binary can be very personal. It does not mean at any point of time androgyny, because many a times people want to associate non-binary, being non-binary by also presenting androgyny as your outer appearances. But I think it's nothing to do with your outer appearances. Gender is how you feel, and
Yes.
it's all here. It's all here. It's exactly, Raga. I mean, if I would ask you today, how are you feeling? I would never be able to put my finger onto your understanding of where are you with your mental state of being today. I would ask you, and I feel that's how gender really is. We need to ask someone without assuming their gender. And therefore I think to be able to have this conversation today, where we are talking about being non-binary, is so important and it's so essential. And being non-binary has nothing to do with my sexuality. Again, I think this is also very imperative to understand. A non-binary is not a queer construct in that sense. Gender and sexuality don't really have a lot to do with each other. They, of course, they complement one another. But sexually I identify as gay, but on my gender identity I identify as non-binary. And I think to be able to understand these things is only when people start to listen to each other. I think it's so important to listen. I think we've really, as a generation, we have really forgotten how to listen to one another. We are so constantly caught up in just talking all the time, and to just keep presenting what we feel all the time, that many a times we're not able to really sit back and to listen, to pay attention to people, which I think is also very essential. So I feel, yeah, I think that's what non-binary means. Non-binary means you do not fit into any binaries.
Wonderful, because there's so much of stereotype, right? Like exactly what you said. We meet someone, we look at them presenting themselves as, say, a man or a woman, and they quickly assume that our pronouns would be she, her, him, his, right? And
Yeah.
that's how the cis world basically looks at us. So when somebody meets you, if they don't ask you what your pronouns are, do you make it a point to tell them?
Absolutely. I always, every time I introduce myself, I make it a point to be like, hi, my name is Faraz, and my pronouns are they, them. Which really kind of, sometimes it makes people uncomfortable. Sometimes it makes people want to also, introduce themselves with their pronouns, because I feel it's only fair when you are introducing yourself with your the pronouns. You don't want to be misgendered. Uh, um, Being a non-binary person, one is often misgendered. Very interesting. I must share this with you. Over emails for the last 1 week, I've been interacting with a film festival based in Europe, which continues to misgender me. And they continue to deny the fact that I am non-binary. I mean, how can they deny the fact that I'm non-binary when I've been telling them that I am? And their uh, their sort of point was that, but you have a beard. And the fact that, and I was like, but how does my facial hair have to do anything with my gender identity. It has nothing to do with it. It's about how I feel. How, why is it so difficult to understand, and why is it so difficult to accept when someone is trying to tell their truth? I mean, this is my truth, this is who I am, and it's taken me a great deal of time to be able to come to this point. My journey with my gender has been a journey as well, the way my journey with my sexuality has been. And I think to be able to even just share this out with the world takes a lot of courage. It's not just you wake up one day and you're like, oh, that's the fad, let's do it. It's so cool to be non-binary, it's so cool to be queer now, a queer is the new black. But I think it's not that. It's really layered, and I think one really needs to understand that uh, to be able to listen to someone, to be able to accept their truth is so important. It is so important.
I hear you. I hear you because I get told myself, people will talk to me and say, but you're not a lesbian, you are bisexual because was once married. So they decide for me what I am. And then I don't know, I don't even fight that battle anymore. Sorry. It's like how many battles to fight. But it is interesting what we just pointed out that you said someone from Europe. Now we would expect a Western world to have this acceptance anyway. So
Yeah.
for that's actually quite surprising for me to hear. The second part is that in the kind of ecosystem that we belong to, for us at least now in the creative world, it is more accepting, right? They will listen. Some, like you said, will feel awkward, will pretend, will be in denial, but most people listen and understand. But what happens outside of this metropolitan, outside of this ecosystem? How do you navigate that?
It's like a friend said, I think we are Lady Gaga's for them. Every time, what Lady Gaga does to the general population, including us, when she shows up wearing a meat dress and we're like, whoa, we're not prepared for it. I think that's what queer people are to people who don't live in a towns and in the urban diaspora for that matter. Interestingly enough, though, Raga, I mean, this is a very personal observation that I've had. I was in Banaras in December. I had gone there for Christmas and New Year's. I just decided to go there because I wanted to just do a trip to Banaras and being my fabulous self. Wearing my fancy jackets. My really colorful jackets. I used to really walk on the ghats, on the Ganga ghats, and there was curiosity. There was always, of course, you make heads turn, but they often are curious about it. There is no sort of course there would be some sort of homophobia, but I think there's just a curiosity, because I think to be able to be an individual, just be an individual, who's not a part of a herd mentality, just to be a person wearing probably a pink, in daytime, can be a revelation for so many people, because everyone is really stuck into binaries. They're all stuck into the grays and the blues and the blacks. To be able to do something which is so authentic to yourself becomes an act of rebellion, given the world that we live in. And it should not be rebellion. I mean, to be myself, to be authentic, to be honest to myself should not be an act of rebellion, but it is an act of rebellion given the world that we live in. And I think it's imperative to understand that this the reason why there is so much of homophobia also comes from the fact that there is no education. There is never a conversation about gender identities. There's never a conversation about sexuality. I mean, India being so regressive, even sex education is not a part of the curriculum anymore. It's been taken out, and that's really sad, because we're not having important conversations. We're talking about we're talking about fossils, and we're talking about World War I, and we're talking about Shakespeare, and we're talking about all these things. But why are we not talking about the relevant conversations that we should be having? Why are we not teaching about global warming? Why are we not teaching about sexuality? Why are we not teaching about gender identity? Why are we not emphasizing on unity? Why are we not emphasizing on sensitivity? Why are we not talking about these things that are really going to make us a more progressive society, make us a more progressive world? Why are we still caught into these age old systems of education, which are, so didactic? They just come from a place of great regressive understandings. I mean, how many times has algebra really helped anyone in life? How many times have you I have never used the Pythagoras theorem every any time after my ninth grade.
Oh,
What a
I
waste,
can't.
what a
I
waste
can't
of,
even. I agree. I
it's
agree.
such a
But
waste.
you're so right. But that's why we're speaking to a filmmaker, because that's where it changes. The narrative changes thanks to people like you, right? But for us, I'm going to come back to something that happened with me yesterday. I received a call. I mean, one of the things that happen all the time is they will ask you, "Oh, you have children, but you just told me that you're gay." So I always say that you missed your biology class. But so at least during my time, they taught about man and woman and the biology. But the other thing, yesterday, a 20-odd year old person called me, and they were just having this conversation about hygiene and about menstrual hygiene. And they actually asked me. They said, "Oh, but you like you get menses, you get period? I like, but you're a lesbian." She really asked me this question. I was shocked. And then when I said, "You really don't realize that a lesbian is a woman who identifies as a woman, and you have all your biological things intact," and and her response to that was, "But in my school they didn't teach me this."
Oh no, that's so
So
sad though.
that is very it shocked me, but I sat back, I reflected, I said, this is the problem and this is what we have to change. And I think
100%.
these conversations hopefully will reach people who say that they haven't been to school, or they haven't attended their biology class, so they will know that
100%.
these things happen. So coming back to your Banaras incident, I want to talk to you about Banaras now. So when you're in Banaras and you're speaking with someone, let's say a Hindi speaking person, how do you introduce yourself and your pronouns? I'm very curious about it.
It's very interesting, Raga, because we speak at home, we speak Hindustani, and Hindustani, and I keep saying Hindustani because it's not Hindi and it's not Urdu. It's a culmination of Hindi and Urdu and Persian and Turkish, language. Or it used to be called Khariboli initially, a language that was used in the Mughal courts, massively, because a lot of people, a lot of local people did not speak Persian, they did not speak Turkish. They used to speak Hindi, or they used to speak a language of the poets, which is Urdu. So we speak Hindustani at home. The interesting part about Hindustani or Urdu is that by default, it's always they them. It's always
Ah,
आप यहाँ आए, आप यहाँ जाए, आप ये करे, or for that matter, tum, So when you're really respecting someone, you'd use aap, and if you're really speaking with someone close to your age, you'll obviously use tum. अ- तुम यहाँ आए, तुम यहाँ गए, and it's a gender neutral term. I can use it for my mom, I can use it for my dad, I can use it for someone younger to me, I can use it for someone older to me. So I usually, it's pretty smooth sailing when it comes to using Hindustani to talk about being non-binary and my pronouns. But when it comes to English, to be able to use they them gets a little difficult for people, because they're like, but then how? Can I still use you for you? Can I and they get confused. And I think, which is again fair enough, because the problem is, again, we've it's sad, because non-binary people have always existed. It's just that now people are talking about it. Now people want to really open dialogues and open conversations, because we've realized, to make our world more progressive, to make our world more successful, we really need to come together. It's not going to happen otherwise. It's only
correct.
going to come when we join forces together, hand in hand, irrespective of our sexuality, our gender identities, our faith, our class, our caste, irrespective of all of that. It is only when we all come together will we be able to flourish, and that is not up for debate. I think we're reaching a point where we're understanding that, and I think, and therefore I think now, in English, they them becomes the third, I mean, it becomes the gender neutral term, because he him is not the right term, she her is not the right term. So what is the next thing? It's they them. So I feel, it is it's a little dicey, and English is a funny language, as we know.
Yes.
So I think, you know, I think it's learning as well. And interestingly enough, Raga, you know, when I was traveling to Canada in 2018 with my film Sisak, it's at that point in time that I really learn about the pronouns and about being non-binary, because I traveled with Sisak to schools and universities in Canada, and even a child as young as 6 years old, when they used to introduce themselves, they used to say, hi, my name is this, and my pronouns are this. And I was like, what is this pronoun thing? Right? Being a queer person, had no idea about pronouns until 2018. It was only in 2018 I was like, wait a minute, I can actually use they them as my pronouns, and I can actually, sorry, my light just fell, and I can actually identify as non-binary. Is that the term? Is non-binary the term that I've been looking for all my life? And I was like, wow, beautiful, right? Let's use that, because that's how I've always felt. I didn't know a term existed of that sort. And
Wow.
that comes to the point that exposure our exposure is so limited. And again, this is something also very interesting, Raga, is that I keep speaking of exposure, and we often think that, oh, being a queer brown person, irrespective of where you are in the world, your experience are going to be pretty similar. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. A queer brown person in America has way more privileges than I do. A queer brown filmmaker in America has way more privileges than I do. For me to be able to make a film like Sheer Qorma takes years. For a queer brown person in America to be able to get funding would be way more easier than the amount of exposure, the amount of access they have. And therefore I keep talking about this, that I think none of us have similar experiences being a queer. None of us, I mean, just the way my coming out story will be very different from your coming out story, I feel exactly in that way our experiences, whether it's to do with what we do in life, or how we love, or who we love, all those experiences are going to be very individualistic, and to be able to have that understanding is also very essential in our journey of acceptance.
I just so love listening to you because this is exactly what we've been saying. And this is exactly why we need these coming out stories from India. Because there are no lived experiences, and everybody thinks that this is it and stereotype, and everybody is the same and everybody has the same needs. No, we don't. Our community is made up of individuals, and individuals are individuals. That is why they call individuals. We have
100%.
individual needs, individual talent, and
Yeah.
individual acceptance also within ourselves, right? I mean, our coming out journeys, I came out publicly at 50 for us. I mean, I look back and think, why did I even hide myself? And that is my next question to you, because I read about, and I'm going to come back to the non-binary, because I think from my understanding, you've had to come out multiple times, but in two ways, right? So tell us about your closet journey, because I read somewhere that you lived in the closet for a long time. And as I
I actually
always, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I actually did not.
Okay.
It's interesting, because I was very comfortable with my sexuality as young as when I was 4 years old. I by default, knew that I was attracted to men, and I felt that that's normal. I mean, some people like men, some people like women, and that's how it is. There's no, you don't have to be, a person of some sex to like person of some sex. Okay, this is how it works. Until the point I was told that, hey, that's not how it works. You need to like someone of the opposite sex. And I said, but I don't. And they're like, oh, then there's a problem, right? You were constantly, then the bullying begins at school, then the harassment begins at school, where constantly told that something is wrong with you. And But I never felt anything was wrong with me. And I was like, but no, but I this feels right to me. I mean, this thing that I feel. And I think it's also important to never deny the understanding. And I don't want to call it sexual awakening, because I think that's not the term, but I think just the fact that you have that identity of your sexuality, and no matter how old you are, it's valid. It's valid. To deny a child saying that your sexuality is not valid, how you feel is not valid, and just wait for it, it'll pass, it's a phase, it'll pass. Don't say that. Let the child be. It's all right. If that's a phase for them, they will come out of it. But let them go through that phase, whatever it is. I think it's so important. And I remember this, that when I reached out to one of my teachers, my English teacher for that matter, and I was very close to her, and she passed away recently. And she was the first person I
Oh,
actually did mention about my sexuality to. And I think it was my third grade or my fourth grade. I don't remember clearly, but one of those times when I reached out to her, and I said, "Is it weird that I like boys?" And she turned around to me and she said, "Do you feel weird about it?" I said, "I don't feel weird, but everyone else feels weird about it." And then she's like, "Then that does not matter. You do how you feel." And I said, "But what if, I'm the only person who feels this way?" And she held my hand and she said, "Believe me, you're not the only person." And
bless her.
bless her, absolutely bless her. And to
Yeah.
be able to, because you really think you're the only queer person in the entire village, right? uh, because there's no representation. You don't
Yeah.
know that it's even okay for you to feel this way. It's even okay for you to have these feelings, because there is zero representation in the 90s in India. Zero queer representation. I think the first time there was some sense of a queer representation in cinema was when Shabana Azmi's Fire released in 97, 98. And I remember I was so moved by it because it was all in the papers, and everyone was talking about a woman being in love with a woman, and it was really hushed hushed. And I remember I bunked school to be able to go watch Fire. And of course, I was denied because it was rated adult, which is, I think, the PG rating of over 16 or over 18, in
18.
the West. So I was denied entry, and I was standing outside the theater saying, like, why am I not, allowed to go and, see this film? And then there was a mob of people who showed up and they wanted to burn the cinema down. And I was like, wow. I said, wow. All this because someone loves someone. And I think somewhere at that point in time, the storyteller in me made a decision that if I ever have the opportunity to make films or to tell stories, I would want to tell stories about people like us who've been invisible, people like us who've existed for generations and generations and centuries, but we are still invisible.
I'm so
I want
glad that you found that you had that calling, basically.
It did.
Really.
It really, and I think it comes from the fact that you don't exist, Raga. You're there, but nobody wants to talk about you. You're there, but nobody wants to address you. You're there, but nobody wants to look at you. They want to look at you. They want to mock you. They want to make fun of you. But when it comes to celebrating you, or just letting you be, or just giving you the space to exist, you're denied that over and over and over and over again. So
I
my
am
journey
so
as a filmmaker
yeah.
has been
Sorry.
about that. It's been about championing. It's really been about championing people like me, people like you, who exist and who are real and who feel everything the way we feel, because we are real. We are as real as anyone else in this entire system. We are a
Sure.
part of the universe. And there's a line in Sheer Qorma, Raga, and I'm sure you must have seen it because I've used it in the trailer as well, where the brother tells the mother, after she says that ये सब कुछ कुदरत के खिलाफ है, which means this is against the law of nature. And the brother goes to the mother and tells her that have they been made by another god? क्या इनको किसी और खुदा ने बनाया है? Because you believe in one god.
Hmm.
So then are you denying the fact that that queer people have not been created by the same God that you worship 5 times a day? Is that what you're trying to say? Because then that's not true, right? And I was grown up with this understanding because I come from a Muslim family. Every time I asked my mom about Allah, what is Allah? And there's a beautiful understanding of Allah in the Quran also. It says Allah is a Noor, Allah is light. Then how can Allah have a gender? right? And if God has made me in their light, I am a reflection of God, right? And I thoroughly believe in this. I thoroughly believe in the fact that nothing in this universe exists without the creator, right? I'm deeply spiritual, and I come from a place of understanding that the universe works in that way. We are the representation of the universe, all of us, each one of us. We carry universes within ourselves. We reflect the universes within ourselves. But my universe that I choose is a universe of love, and that's all I keep choosing. It's a journey that I've chosen for myself, of love, over and over and over and over again. Keep reminding people that the only thing that is really going to change this world, the only thing that is going to bring us together, the only thing that is going to make us flourish is love, and nothing else but that.
I agree. Interestingly, last weekend we were in London, as you know. We were at a Pride March, and as the Pride March finished, as we were walking back, there were these couple of people there who were propagating hate as they do, and they looked at us, Nicola and I, and they turned around and said, "You have no place in heaven. There will be no place for you in heaven. You are not going to heaven." And I'm thinking, if that, I mean, I made a joke of it, of course, and I said that if you're in heaven, I don't want to go there anyway you know
Very
but
true.
yeah, but the fact is that there is so much of hatred towards people who just love each other. You'd rather be in a dysfunctional relationship, in a any relationship for that matter, but love you can't stand. It's just
you know
love.
I agree to you, Raga, and this is something I keep saying in most of my interviews. I get so much of hate because I've made a film about love. Had I made a film about war, had I made a film about something that sort of champions violence, had I made a film about blood and gore, I would have been celebrated. I would have been called for many national and international panels and this and that and all of that. But because I have made a film on love, because I have made a film on acceptance, I'm getting so much of hate, because we have really forgotten how to love each other. And when we see so much of love, we cannot make sense of it anymore. Our
It on
default is to, yeah,
Yeah.
our default is to give it hate.
It almost feels like love has become outside the comfort zone. So it should be the other way around.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I
So
agree to you.
coming back to your coming out story, where did you grow up? First of all, it was in Mumbai or outside of Bombay?
I grew up in Bombay.
Bombay.
I still call it Bombay. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
just
No, I also call it Bombay. I was just
old
being
school.
politically correct.
I'm just old school. I grew up in Bombay. I did my schooling in Bombay, and so Bombay has been home for a very long time. Of course, I moved to the US after that for education, but most of my growing up happened here. And of course, I moved to the US when I was 15 years old, so pretty early, because you're still forming your opinions, you're still finding your voice in that sense. And America happened to be that sense of exposure for me, where it was okay to be whoever you were. But the US that I went to was post 9/11. I traveled to US in
Oops.
2003, and my name, my identity then had become a problem. And the amount of Islamophobia that I have faced by, I think it was my first day in high school, and I was asked by someone, "Do you have a gun in your bag, or are you going to blow up the school?" And all this because I had a Muslim name.
Oh my God.
So to first of all have experienced homophobia back home, then to have gone to the United States and experience Islamophobia, and then to come back to India and experience homophobia and Islamophobia both now. So it just never stops, Raga. It's just like I in fact, the other day I was talking to this really close friend of mine, and I said, is there a place in the world where one can just exist without being questioned for who you really are? Is there some place like that?
In my house, in my home. Come and live
Adopt
with us.
me.
No, but I question this. This is a question I ask myself every day, because you can't walk out in the streets here and feel safe. I mean, I've lived both lives, a heterosexual life, as in when I was married, and I felt safe, but I don't feel safe anymore. And no matter
Yeah.
I'm of a certain age, I have grown up children, I still don't feel safe. So I can just imagine the others who are journeying through
Yeah.
these times. It's very difficult. It's very
Yeah.
difficult. And I just want to come back. So you grew up in Bombay. Um, you grew up in a Muslim family. You went to the US. All that apart, how was it within your family? Did they accept you for who you were, or was that also something that you had to sit your mom down or your dad down and talk about it?
Yeah. I think Raghav, it's something that I also explore in my film Sheer Qorma, that acceptance and love are not destinations, they're journeys. And they're journeys that go on until the last days of our life, until our last breath. It's not a destination, it's a journey that it's ongoing. It's a process of learning, it's a process of unlearning that's ongoing. And that never really stops. So when I had to come out to my mom, I was 21 then, and I came out to her under pretty difficult circumstances. I had lost my first boyfriend in an accident, and I was 21.
Oh my God,
And
sorry.
thank you. And sadly, I happened to be back in India, and he was in America. So there was no way of me, a 21-year-old to be able to afford airfare to go, to the United States to attend his funeral even. And that is when I had to come out to my mom, because she was like, "Why do you want to go to America? It's okay, we lose friends." And I said, "But no, Mama, he was not my friend. He was my boyfriend. We dated for 6 years." And she was shocked, and she didn't speak to me for 6 months, because she was just not able to wrap her head around the fact that I was gay. So for her, it was pretty difficult. And again, fair enough. It's her journey. She has never really had any exposure in that sense. And we're talking about 2009. Really 2008, 2009. So even back then, I mean, it's really around the corner in that sense. But even back then, it was a different world. Um, so for her, I think her journey of accepting me is an ongoing process. Every every film I make is dedicated to her. Every interview I give is dedicated to her, because I think it's, in a way, it's for her to be able to understand her child more, right? There are things that I can never tell her, being a brown queer kid. There are certain conversations you cannot really have with your parents. We're not white people who can sit down and be like, we're going to have a chat about this. That's not how it rolls, right? And by default we avoid the conflicts. By default we avoid conversations that really matter the most. We'll ask each other 200 times in a day, have you eaten food? But we'll never ask each other, how are you feeling, mama? Are you feeling okay? Are you fine? We'll never ask each other that, and sadly we don't. But I have started asking these questions now. She recently saw Sheer Qorma on the big screen, and she saw it with Shabana Azmi ji and Divya Datta and Swara Bhaskar at a private screening in Bombay. And after the film got over, I saw her in the audience, and she was just weeping. And then Shabana ji called her on stage, and she just hugged me for 5 minutes, and she just cried. We didn't really speak about the film after that. We didn't really speak much about it until the time that she said, "What a beautiful film you have made." And she turned to me and she said, "It's that simple, isn't it, to understand what love is?" And it broke me. It broke me so much that. So I think my journey again, Raga, as a filmmaker has been, really, I make films for my mother. I genuinely make films for my mother. I don't make these films to win awards. I don't make these films to talk to a larger audience. I make these films purely from a very selfish place, to let my mother understand that there's nothing wrong with your child. There's nothing wrong with your child. And I think, as as queer as queer children, sometimes you have to become the parents.
Yeah.
you right? I'm sure you must be relating to this as well.
Yes, I'm trying very hard not to cry. You've touched me so much, really, which is just how you express the whole conversation, because this is so real. Most
Yeah.
of us sadly go through this experience. And in my case, my mother tried to kill me. She tried to knife me when she
I'm
heard.
so sorry. I'm
So,
so sorry.
yeah, but they come from a place of, not understanding, right? So when you're sharing this, I can just feel it. And I think dedicating it to your mother is to dedicating it to all the mothers of queer
Absolutely.
children. It's
Absolutely.
beautiful. For us, I
Absolutely.
am going to adopt you. This is so beautiful. No, really, you have touched my soul. What a beautiful storyteller you are. How
Thank
wonderful
you.
how wonderfully you think. But tell me more about this journey of how then your mother, because that's a big deal for
Uh-huh.
mothers also. For us, it
100%.
is. So
Yeah.
tell me about more about that journey of coming out to your mother. And now, how is it for you?
I think, my sexuality is never really talked about. She reads my interviews in the papers, and it's interesting, Raga, because I think the success that I've had as a filmmaker has made my journey a little easier. Sadly, and I hate that. I absolutely hate that. It's not something that I chose. I just wanted to be a filmmaker, right? I didn't choose to be a filmmaker who will be on the front page of every newspaper. I didn't ask for that. I just wanted to tell my stories authentically, honestly, and with love. And sorry, that really that really sort of connected with many people across the globe, and I'm grateful for that. But that was never the intention. So I think with my mom especially, she watches, she reads my interviews, and she watches my films, and we don't really talk about my sexuality. Of course, there is still that sense that maybe someday things will change. Maybe one day Faraz will be like, find me a bride, I want to get married. Maybe one day I'll snap out of it. But I think with time, I have seen a change in her. Initially when she used to hug me, Raga, I used to feel that she used to leave parts of myself behind, parts that she didn't associate with. But over the years, as she hugs me, I feel that with time, she starts holding parts of me that, don't really align with who she is, that she hasn't been able to accept. And very gently, over the years, she's been able to hold more and more and more and more of me. Even now when she hugs me, she is not able to hold all of me, but she's able to hold more of me than she held even a year back. And
Beautiful.
this has been a journey, and this is what my film is about, Raga. My film is so personal because it talks about exactly this journey, that when you hold someone, when you even embrace someone for that matter, do you embrace them entirely, or do you leave parts behind that don't resonate with who you are? And I
Beautiful.
think that's the journey of acceptance. That's the journey of love. It's not a destination. It's a journey. And it's a
Just
journey that goes on until our last day.
so,
You
how
know,
do you feel about all this? I mean, this is your mother's perspective, right? But how does Faraz feel going through this journey? You're a gentle person, I can feel that. But mother-son relationship is quite different, right? It's an individual relationship. So, how do you journey through that? Non-acceptance, slow acceptance, half of you acceptance. You know,
I genuinely feel that somewhere in this whole um, a process of being the child and then becoming the filmmaker, and somewhere the Faraz has taken a backseat. You know, because there's never really been room for me to have a day to myself, right? It's always you're being Faraz the queer activist, or you're being Faraz the filmmaker, or you're being Faraz the child, or you're being Faraz the something or the something or the something. So I've never been asked this question in such a long time, Raga, that how do you feel, because I think people often deny that space to you. They deny you the right of being a human being, because you're a public figure, you're a filmmaker, you're this, you're that, and it's really tiring. It's really, it's a pretty lonesome journey.
sure.
And it does get very lonesome. It's not easy, carrying so much weight on your shoulders, and it's not easy having so many responsibilities on your shoulder, right? But I think with great the power comes great responsibilities, very rightly said. But I feel that somewhere in that you lose parts of yourself. You lose parts of yourself that you wish. I mean, I never really had a childhood that I really enjoyed. I never really had the first love where I could really go on a first date with someone and sit down and have a milkshake with. Never had it.
And why is that? Why is that?
Because I grew up in a very homophobic world, Raga. There was nobody else in my school who wanted, who was openly a queer, except me, right? I was very open about my sexuality, and of course I was bullied and harassed and beaten for it. But I think so you're always lonely. You're lonely when you're being honest to yourself. You often end up very sadly. So, and I hate to say this. So my experience with love has always been that. I mean, initially, and of course there's been a lot of unlearning that I have been doing personally to take away the trauma from love. You know, because when one talks about love, I often have very traumatic experiences. Being a queer person, it's love. Love isn't easy. Most of the time we end up in relationships with people who are already probably in a committed relationship with someone else, or who wouldn't even share with you that they're already in a committed relationship with someone else. I remember one of my relationships way back. I think maybe 5 years back. I was seeing someone over 3 months, and one random day, uh, we were at a dinner, and his phone rings, and he just the color of his face transformed. And I said, why, what happened? And he's like, and he had to really leave the table to take the phone call. I was like, what's going on? And he was like, it's my wife, I have to go back home. And literally the earth from beneath my feet just sank. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I didn't want to tell you that I'm married because I was like, so, again, not his fault. This is a society that you're living in where it is okay to cheat on your partner, but it is not okay to live authentically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, my experiences with love so far have always come from that place, that place which is pretty traumatic. So I've been trying to unlearn that. I'm trying to unlearn that in my personal space, and to undo all of that, undo all of that trauma, and to disassociate with that. Because love should never be that. Love should never be traumatic. Love should never be. And it's interesting because the reason, and this is something that Shabana ji pointed out when we were shooting for Sheer Qorma. She said, "Is this the mother that you want to have in your life?" And I said, yeah. And not just me. I want every queer child, or every child, not just a queer child, every child in this world to have a mother who loves them for who they are. It is so important, Raga, to have that one relationship in your life, especially of a parent who just accepts you unconditionally, who loves you unconditionally, no questions asked. It is very imperative for your sanity.
I so
And I
agree with you, Faraz. So agree with you. I did a TEDx talk on this, 50 and out, and on that talk I talk about that there's one person in this world. There's only one. There are many, but there is one person you have that expectation from. It's your mother. That your
Yeah,
mother, no matter what, will love you unconditionally. That's
yeah,
your bosom. That's your safe place, right, to go to.
yep,
And when you
yep,
don't get that from your mother, in which happened in my case, I mean, later on we made peace many years later, but when it didn't happen, it breaks you. Your world falls apart. You can't show it to
yep,
the world, but inside it, you break into pieces because it is heartbreaking. That
yep,
one person, right? And I
yep,
really believe and I feel that through your story, Sheer Kurma, if that is what you portrayed as a mother, I really hope all mothers listening in, all parents listening in, please watch this. Please learn from these experiences. These are real experiences. And for us, what I really love about the film is that you're changing the narrative. It is a meaningful, real story, not some caricature that we've been given over the last. We've been fed such nonsense, sorry, in the
Yep.
form of cinema, and no
Yep.
wonder we've had issues growing up to
Yep.
accept it ourselves, or the slurs that we get is because that's
Yep.
what we've been exposed to. So I'm
100%.
pleased, if nothing else, that Faraz exists and Faraz is making these very purposeful, very meaningful cinema. And
Thank
I
you,
and
Raga.
I thank you for that, really, because I think, even when my Onir, the filmmaker, asked me to write a story about my life, so I said to Onir, where is the lesbian representation in cinema? Where are we? Why is only about gay men? Why are we not writing about women? We exist as well. And we have
100%.
real stories. We have
100%.
real, I mean, I've been with my partner for 15 years and people get shocked. Oh, 15 years with the same person. I said, yeah, that's why. There are stories like that. We also exist.
Yeah.
We live, we change the light bulb, we go grocery shopping together. We don't have a different life, which again I'm sure you've experienced. So thank you for making a film like Sheer Qorma. I've not seen Sisak, no, either,
Yeah.
but I've heard a lot about it over the years. I've always told myself someday I will watch it, and will now watch it. But I'm just going to come back to another thing that bothers me about the representation and the LGBT is it difficult for you now? One, you've as a queer person, you identify as gay, and then you've now come out saying I'm non-binary, and then, like you said, you're a Muslim. So all this packaging, does it become difficult for you? Because intersectionality we talk about, right, quite a bit. To me, I know every time I do say something else, I've become more and more boxed. So how do you come out of that box, for us?
Yeah, I think, Raga, for me, I think, I mean, these are just terms, these are just, sort of boxes for people, but this is who I am, you know. And I think we are at a place where I can use these terms and, help others understand me in a better way, so I think these terms should never really overwhelm someone. These terms should help someone understand the person better. It's imperative to understand the difference, the reason why we use terms as gay, non-binary, no, Muslim, and all the, the terms that I associate myself with. These are so that others can understand me better, and not to overwhelm anyone. So I think, interestingly enough, it's never really for me. This is existence, If I have to be honest with myself, this is who I am. So for me, I just have to exist, and I am, right? So it's never really been about, is this going to be tokenistic? Is this going to be really, will people get overwhelmed? Yeah, if they get overwhelmed, too bad. I mean, I'm not trying to overwhelm them. I'm just trying to be myself, the way they are trying to be themselves. And I think to each their own. And I think the lesson here is that embracing one another. We're so scared of embracing one another. We're so scared of letting someone just exist, letting someone just be. Why are we so scared? Why do we get so overwhelmed when someone says, this is who I am? It always overwhelms us, because then we're like, oh, then do I also have to be something? Yeah, just be yourself. you know
Exactly.
just be
True.
yourself. And sadly, what happens with me is when I walk into a room, first thing they identify about me is my sexuality. And then I introduce myself and they're like, oh, non-binary Muslim. Immediately, the boxes that you've been trying to destroy, you've been put inside box after box after box after box after box, right? So while you're trying to break binaries, you end up becoming more binary at times, because this is how people relate to you then. Very interestingly, the other day someone said, but if you're non-binary, then you have to look androgynous. And I said,
Says
no.
who? Yeah.
Who makes these rules? I got a lot of people from within the queer community who said, but if Divya Datta's character is non-binary, why is she wearing a hijab? I said, because that's the character. Because Divya's character, who identifies as non-binary as Saira, wants to wear a hijab, so they will wear a hijab. Why can they not wear a hijab? Because they're non-binary, so they have to be androgynous. I said, who said? Who is making these rules? Who is giving out these rule books? I never got one, right? So I think Again, the lesson: listen to people, and in Sheer Qorma, in fact, you'll whenever you watch the film, you'll see that it really breaks many boxes. It breaks boxes about gender, it breaks boxes about sexuality, it breaks boxes about one's faith, it breaks boxes about what it means to be a queer person of color, it breaks boxes about being a mother, it breaks boxes about being a child, it breaks a box about being an ally to the queer community, and it breaks boxes about great things that the queer community, especially the South Asian queer community, has, which is and I'm going to talk about it because I think it's important to talk about it. The South Asian queer community, and I think some queer communities across the globe, they're deeply misogynistic. Like you asked very rightly, where are the women? Where are the queer women of color? Why do we not see them in cinema? Why do we not see them in the mainstream? Where are they? Most definitely they exist. Then why is no one telling their stories? Why is no one putting a spotlight on them? Why is it always cis queer men with 8-pack abs, cis queer white men? I understand what Tom has done by winning the Olympics and the gold medal. Great, good. But please do not take away the privileges that Tom has. Being a white cis person, growing up in the West, having access to all the resources that you have access to, right? P- People don't have the same access. So we're not even talking about equality here. We're not even talking about equity here.
Right.
The base rule is only different. Then what are you really celebrating? Are you celebrating privilege? What are you celebrating? I really want to understand, right? So I think it's important to understand these questions and keep asking ourselves these things over and over and over again, because we ourselves have so many prejudices that we are unaware of, you know and therefore I think it's important to talk about it openly and honestly and question everything, because only then will we be able to learn. Only then will we be able to come to a point that we really get to a point of embracing one another. Otherwise, it's just going to be tokenism.
Yeah, I agree.
This whole thing about inclusion. Like the other day, someone said, "Why did you make a film with actors who are not a queer?" I said, "How do you know? How do you know that they are not queer?" So they said, "So are you saying they're a queer?" I said, "No, I don't know, and I don't want to know. It is their prerogative that if they want to come out or whenever they want to come out, it's their journey. So are you saying that an actor to play a queer, even if they do identify or they don't identify as a queer in their personal lives, do they have to come out to play queer characters? Then what happens about this whole journey where you also keep saying that a person should only come out when they are comfortable to come out? Then what happens to that?
Such a
These are the
good
conversations.
perspective. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
So
These are the
true.
conversations we need to have. So a person who needs to play a trans person, they have to come out as trans before they play trans. Why can they not be trans and keep their identities to themselves and play a trans person? Will we deny them that will we deny them that space? Because I've been in the situations, Raga. As a filmmaker, I have been in the situations where many people have come and said, I actually am a trans person, but I don't want the world to know about it. So then, but they were like, but if I play this trans, the character, then they will be behind me saying that, oh, but you're not trans and how are you playing a trans character? So then, I don't think I'll be able to do this. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Why?
So true.
And therefore, I feel that inclusion really needs to be looked at in a different perspective. Had I made Sheer Korma, and my first place was to always cast a queer actors. I did open up the casting for 3 months to cast queer actors. Unfortunately, all the people who reached out to me, they did not fit the role. It was only after that did I say, okay, now that these people don't fit into these characters, let's look at my wish list, right? Let's go and cast people who will really fit the role. But I did look for queer actors initially, but people won't know that. People will hold a gun to my head saying, Where are the queer actors? I'm like, yeah, but I put 3 months of money from my own pocket behind the casting process, which you are not aware of. So please understand that, being a queer person of the color, my first preference is going to be a queer actor. Understand that I am not this person who's going to sit at a place and talk about inclusion and then not practice inclusion. That's not who I am. I put my money where my mouth is 100% day in and day out. But I think people always want to come from a point of saying that, oh, hold people accountable, definitely hold people accountable, but at the same time, ask them, did you even try?
Yeah. No, but people form opinions and they have a judgment, and they will share. If, even if you had done what they said that you should have done, there would have been something else they would have gone after. So this
Yeah,
is that you can't stop. I mean, we've seen that a lot. Well, this brings me to an interesting point. Film industry. Why is there so few people in the industry who are out? I openly out is openly gay. I mean, I can count on my fingers, and it's a huge industry. So do you think that again there is fear or there is lack of a safe space?
I think Raga, I think the film industry is representative of the world that we live in, right? Like any other industry. There are so many people who continue to live in the closet in the world that we live in, also have parallel lives, have live lives of lies to themselves, live lives of which are inauthentic, dishonest to themselves, because that's what they choose. And I think the film industry is a representation of the world. So the way that people choose to be inside the closet in the world, that way people choose to live inside the closet, in the film industry or in the corporate world, for whatever reasons. They all have their own reasons. I have never really questioned people saying that, why are you not out, you should totally come out. No, it's really their journey. I'm nobody to urge anyone to come out, but what I can do as a person who is out, hold their hands and let them know whenever they're ready, we are here for them. That's what we
True.
can do. we
Sure.
can offer them we can offer them that comfort. We can offer them that, we can make them see the importance of them coming out, and how many lives will they change when they come out.
Sure.
That's what we can do. But there's nothing more that we can do, and I feel it's not fair to always, I know, because I say this and I'm not trying to be a protective of the film industry or whatever. I don't come from a film family. But I think it's important to understand that, like any other industry, the film industry also has the people fighting homophobia personally. They are homosexuals, but they're also deeply homophobic, right? Like any other industry. So it's
Sure.
nothing to do with the film industry, for that matter. I think it's just about how evolved we are as a world, how accepting are we as a world, and how much we have progressed as a world to be able to live our lives authentically. It's really about that.
No, I understand that, but the reason I spoke about it because in the corporate space in India right now, it's D&I is a big thing. People are creating safe places, right, for people to come out. Again, I mean, the representation is very low. I mean, I come from a corporate world. 80% of the people don't even talk about it amongst
Yeah.
their own quits. So I was wondering whether the film industry has anything that is happening there where they're saying that, okay, you know what, it is a safe place for you. There are policies around because corporates have policies. There's posh
100%.
policies, yeah. But
Yeah.
does the film industry have those things in place, that structure in place,
Yeah.
which can help them, allow them, or
Yeah.
give them permission to come out and feel safe if they wanted to?
Yeah, I agree to you in that. I feel the corporate world, the reason the corporate world has DNI is because most of these corporations have their roots in the West.
Correct.
They're born in the West, where DNI has to be practiced. It has to be, because that is your CSR or whatever. I mean, these corporate terms that I don't know of. But I think, in being responsible, in being inclusive, corporations that are in India, that are born in the West, practice a DNI, for that matter, right? I want to really understand how many corporations that are born in India practice DNI. I don't think so. I
Very,
know
very
any,
few. Very
very
few.
few.
You're
I
right.
know Indian corporations, I know Indian banks who don't practice D&I at all, right? I don't want to name them, but I know, because I know people who work for these banks. And when I asked them, I said, do you want to screen my film on a DNI? And they said, we don't have a DNI in our bank. And I said, what? I said, but how? They're like, it's an Indian bank, we don't have DNI. So I think, likewise in the film industry, because it is not a body that is born in the West, and given the amount of public opinion that really counts, and the homophobia that continues to exist in India, um, it remains where it is. It remains stagnant. There are very few people who want to come out, and there's fair reason behind it also. Being an openly queer person, Raga, I am constantly denied opportunities to make mainstream films. I'm constantly denied opportunities to make the projects that are not queer, right? And I'm absolutely able, as much as any other person in the business, to make non-queer content. Recently I did something for someone, and it happened to be a queer content. And then, as a joke, I reached out to them, and I said, hey, listen, I can also direct things that are not queer, because I'm a storyteller. You don't have to just reach out to me to make queer content. um, I think so. I think, sadly, and even when a queer content is made in India, it goes to the cishet people. The cishet people are writing it, the cishet people are directing it, the cishet people are writing it also, and they're acting in it also. I'm like, there are openly queer people in the industry. Why not give them this opportunity? We often talk about a queer representation in front of the camera. What happens to queer representation behind camera? Why does no one want to talk about that? Why? That's it. Our journey of inclusion only ends because whatever the eye sees, that's about it, and not what happens behind. Sad, really sad. And therefore, I think it's important, because when I made Sheer Qorma, I made sure 95% of my cast and crew was women. Most of those women identify on the queer spectrum, and it was imperative for me, because I'm making a film about queer people and non-binary people of the color. It was imperative for me to have a team that represents what's happening in front of the camera as well, right? So I think these conversations need to happen, and you need to hold people accountable. I know so many cishet directors who are making queer content, and it's rubbish because you cannot research on my life. You cannot. There is a difference between research and lived experience.
I
Your
agree.
6 months of research will never equate to my lived experiences as a queer brown person. Therefore, I will be able to tell a queer story way better than you will be able to tell a queer story, for a simple reason: research does not equate to live experiences. And this should not be difficult to understand.
I agree, and sensitivities, right? The depth
100%.
of a feeling of an emotion. I mean, how can you even compare? I agree with you. There's so much I have learned today for us, and I'm just like, as you see, I've been sitting and listening mostly, and I love that. And but just before we conclude this particular interaction, because I think I will come back to you for more. You're far more. I think you have so much more to talk about, right? You're a real storyteller. Is there a message you want to leave for our younger generation who are watching this, who I believe today have a little more privileged life than we had, at least I had access to when I was growing up, because of the conversations that we are having now, because of the access to coming out stories from India and such content like Sheer Kurma, you know? So, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, I think, if there's one thing I want to share, is that, understand your privilege, understand what it entails, understand the amount of work you can do utilizing the privilege for people who don't have the same accesses as you do. Because in this journey of queerness, in this journey of LGBTQIA plus, we need to understand that none of us are going to be free unless all of us are going to be free. It is a community, and the reason it's important that LGBTQIA, we keep, every alphabet, we keep naming every alphabet, is to understand that everyone has an equal place in the queer community. But sadly, that's not how representation works in India or across. Therefore, utilize your privilege to give voices to the voiceless. Utilize your privilege to create platforms for the folks who don't have platforms. Create access, create opportunities for folks who do not have those accesses, who do not have those opportunities. As a privileged a queer person, even speaking an English language is a privilege, and I think we need to understand these things. So if you have access, if you have a privilege, please utilize it to create access, create opportunities for other queer people who don't have the same accesses and privileges the way you do. Because only then will we be able to create a world that is more equal, create a world that is more accepting, create a world that is more embracing, where everyone is celebrated for who we are and not denied opportunities because of our identities. That's very important. And
How
always come from a place of love. Please be
love.
kind to one another. Please. I think there's something that I learned. My Khalajan always used to say this to me. Two things to remember every morning you wake up. Have the courage, be kind. And I keep saying this to everyone every time I meet them. Have the courage, be kind.
Audience, have courage and be kind. And remember, no one is free unless everyone is free. We have to remember that. The conversation was beautiful. I think this is one of the best conversations I've had. Really enjoyed it. I have learned really so much, as I shared earlier. I've unlearned also quite a bit for us. I think you will be my guru. Really, that's the word I would say, because it doesn't matter what you are. Truly a soulful, spiritual person. I could relate to a lot of things you said. I'm sure our audience will relate to a lot of things you've said. And we wish you so much success with Sheer Qorma in every aspect of your journey. Thank you very much for being on our show and for sharing your lived experience, basically, and so openly and so candidly. Thank you.
Thank you, Raga. Such a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for having me. And I think, a kudos to you, for doing this, for really creating, a space for people like me to share our stories with the world. Because never enough, never enough. We need to keep finding ways to keep the pushing ourselves out in every opportunity. And so, thank you for creating this platform to, put our stories out there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for us, and hopefully one day we will make a film together. Okay, that's
Absolutely, I
that's on my
can't wait.
bucket. Yeah,
I
and of
absolutely
course,
can't wait.
Sheer Kurma in London. We are going to bring our entire gang from the LGBT
I hope I
community.
can come. I really,
Yes, yes, yes,
I really
yes.
want to come to the UK. UK and I have been jinxed for some reason, Raga. I told you about this. We've just been jinxed. I've never been to the UK. I've traveled everywhere in the world, but to the UK, I was supposed to be there for BFI in March, but then the festival got cancelled because of the pandemic. So now I'm hoping that I can come, for the UK premiere whenever it happens this year, hopefully in September, October. So I can't wait to
Yes,
meet you.
yes, yes, wonderful. And I think now that you've met Nicola and I, your jinx is
Yes,
broken. So now
yes.
it's going to happen.
But I'm
Because
virtually present in the UK now, so that's
yeah,
a start.
wonderful. And I must thank Nicola. By the way, this the whole series coming out series from India was Nicola's idea, and she
Thank you,
curated
Nicola.
this because
How
she
sweet.
realized how much I struggled over the last 15 years to find these stories. So thank you, Nicola, who sits in the background
Thank
and
you,
supports
Nicola.
us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this.
And a couple of more thank yous. One is to the digital fix team who do our digital and social media. Duraya, thank you very much. We also have the herbal theory, and I hope you like organic products, sustainable products for us, because our gifting partner, the herbal theory, will send you a little hamper
Oh,
of
lovely.
beautiful
Thank you so
essential
much.
oils and candles, and it's very little, but it's a token from us
How
for,
lovely.
yeah. So thank you, and
Thank you.
audience. Thank you for joining in and for engaging with us. Do write into us with any further questions, feedback, thoughts. If you want to know more about Faraz, please write to Faraz as well at theviewsroom@gmail.com. And thank you for joining in. Please remember to follow me at Totally Out Now on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm very accessible. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Raga Olga D'silva. There are many interesting stories out there. We've got about 20 coming out stories from all across the spectrum. Please watch, please share. Remember, closets are for clothes and not to hide your truth. That's my favorite line uh, for us.
Love it.
So,
I love it.
signing out at Totally Out Now. You're watching Coming Out series from India presented by the Views Room. Thank you for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Raga. Thank you so much.